Everybody. It's so it always takes me by surprise, that thing. So nice that you can spare the time in the evening, especially in the summer holidays, because I know how busy we all are. Um, for anyone who's not sure, hasn't joined any of our webinars before, my name's Kim, and I'm a childminder in Colchester. Been a childminder for 23 years, and I'm also the childminding partner for the Stronger Practice Hub. And this evening we have Lisa with us from the barn. Um, who's going to share her sort of expertise and knowledge with us as well. And Damon, also from the barn, and he's going to be our IT support. The whole point of this session really is for us to be able to share best practice, share some hints and tips with each other. So I'd really like it to be as interactive as possible. Please don't be worried about interrupting. Either just chip in and say something, or put your hand up, or put something in the chat, and one of us will pick up on it, and sort of you can join in the conversation. But I'll just give you a bit of a rundown of how the session's going to work this evening. So tonight we're going to be talking about malleable materials. Hopefully most of you who are here will have been on one of the network sessions where we've had a malleable materials session. So clay and Play-Doh and that type of thing. If you haven't, don't worry, it's fine, it doesn't matter. Hopefully your turn will come at some point, but I'm sure we're all, as early years practitioners, we're all pretty familiar with malleable materials. So what we're going to do this evening is I'm just going to have a quick talk about how we define malleable materials, what we mean by it, and then how they support development. And then we're going to have a think about how we can provide these sort of experiences in a home-based environment, because I think we all see these wonderful pictures on Pinterest and things where we would love to have loads of space and massive resources, and we haven't all got that because we're usually working from our homes, aren't we? Or some of you lucky people are working from fantastic cabins, but even so we haven't got tons and tons of space. So it's really good for us to share ideas about how we're doing all these different things. I've put together, as usual, a Padlet, which is like an online notice board. I've put the link in the chat, and I'll pop it on again later on. And on there are lots of pictures and links to different things about malleable materials. It's a big document, so when you go onto it, scroll all the way across to the right and you'll see the malleable materials section. There's information on different ways you could offer malleable materials. There are recipes for things like Play-Doh, and there's also information about the information you might have seen earlier this week that came out about using flour or raw flour in play. So we can cover that. We can include that in our chat later. But if you haven't seen that, it was on the EY Comms email this week, then just have a look on there, and the link is there to the official guidance on how to use flour safely in play. So that's the sort of schedule for this evening. And I should just let you know that all of the things I'm going to talk about aren't just me saying them off the top of my head. They're all backed up by evidence from the fantastic evidence store, the early years evidence store. There is also a link to that on the Padlet, and there is a link at the top of the chat as well. So the evidence store gathers evidence from all different types of approaches to early years and supporting development in early years, and picks out the ones that are cost effective and are proven to support children's outcomes. So it's always a really good idea if you want to ever look on there and get some ideas about what am I doing? How can I change things around? How can I get new ideas? And how do I know that these ideas are going to have an actual impact, on a positive impact on children's outcomes? Because that's obviously what we're all aiming for in the end. So it's all backed up from evidence from the evidence store, but also I've linked it all to the Development Matters document. I know we don't have to use that. It's not a statutory requirement anymore. And I know there are alternatives such as Birth to 5, but I think most of us are familiar with Development Matters, so it seemed like the obvious one to use. So hopefully you're all familiar with that. And because malleable materials are such an amazing experience for children and activity for children, I could really look through development matters and pick out virtually everything that that's on there. It could cover almost the whole of development matters, but I've just picked out one or two little bits from each area of learning that are relevant to tonight and are also relevant to the evidence that we've got that shows that it's really supporting children's outcomes. So without further ado, let's talk about malleable materials. What do we mean by malleable materials? I have to say, I didn't really know. I thought I knew what that meant, but when I looked up the definition, it comes from metalworking. Oh, thank you. Damon's going to scroll through some pictures. I should have said, give you some ideas of what's going on. It's a metalworking term, which means a material that can be rolled or flattened with a hammer or a roller. So obviously that sort of makes sense when you think of clay or Play-Doh. Maybe doesn't make quite so much sense with things like sand, but for the purposes of our chat this evening, I've narrowed down the massively wide range of malleable materials to sand, clay, Play-Doh, and, as in this picture, mud. Because I feel like they're the ones that most of us have in our continuous provision. They're cost effective, they're not particularly expensive to provide for children in our care. And there are lots of other lovely, wonderful things, slime and that type of stuff. But these are the four that I felt, given the time we've got, are the most sort of obvious that we all have in some way or another, or have access to. This picture is obviously taken at the beach, so it doesn't have to be something that's actually in your home, but you can still have access to it, can't you? So that's what we mean by malleable materials, something that we can shape, we can mold, we can roll, we can flatten it out. And because children gain so much from that, as I say, it covers so many areas of development, starting with the characteristics of effective learning. I think anyone that's or the link to the Padlet, Louise, is right at the very top. If you scroll up in the chat, I put it in very first thing, but I can pop it back in again. Yeah, the characteristics of effective learning are really telling us not what you learn, but how you learn. And they're so vital to helping children develop that resilience and independence and critical thinking skills that we really need them to have as they're adults and moving on throughout their lives. It supports mental health, it supports so many things throughout life. So with the characteristics of effective learning, the bits I've picked out that are relevant to tonight, I've got independent choices. So hopefully when we're offering these type of materials, we're offering it as a child-led experience where we're just enabling the experience, but the children are making the choices about how they use those materials. We used to, in the past, didn't we, see laminated Play-Doh mats where children were expected to do certain things with the Play-Doh and that type of thing. Well, we're really moving away from that now because that doesn't really have a huge amount of learning value, especially in the early years. So we're thinking of independent choices. They've got their materials and they might be choosing what they're going to do with them, or which tools they're going to use, or which things they're going to add to it. Active learning, well, there's nothing more active than rolling, squashing, digging, squishing something. So you're doing all of those things. And the critical thinking and creative thinking, they're all parts of the characteristics of effective learning. And are all completely relevant to malleable materials. And then moving down from the characteristics of effective learning to the areas of learning, we've got things like communication and language. So if anyone that came on my communication webinar that I did, or has been on any of the mentoring sessions with me, I'm a big fan of using words in context for children, because it's been shown, there is evidence to show that this really supports children's communication and language skills. So for instance, when a child is playing with clay, you might use words like it's slimy, it's soft, it's hard, it's heavy. When they're digging in the sand or digging in the mud, you might say that's a really deep hole. You know, your sandcastle is really high, that type of thing. You're using words in context. It helps the child to understand what that word really means and to store that knowledge in their mind, in their brains, for when they need that word later on in life. So it's a sort of a word bank stored up in their head. But because you've used it in context, it makes a huge difference, and it just makes more sense to a child, as it would to us. A new word that we hadn't heard before would need some explaining, wouldn't it? And if it's a word that you're actually feeling something that's soft or slimy or slippery, at the same time as you hear that word, then your brain thinks, oh, that makes means. So another thing I'm always a big fan of is not necessarily interrupting children that are massively engaged in their play, but instead to work alongside them. If anyone's heard of the Reggio Emilia approach, that's sort of working alongside the child rather than the adult being the expert and imparting knowledge to the child. So in this case, it works really well. Imagine you're sitting next to a child and you're both playing with the Play-Doh at the table, and you're not necessarily having to interrupt the child or ask the child questions, because that can really disrupt their learning, but you can talk at the same time about what you're doing. You can narrate your own activity. I'm going to add some mint to my Play-Doh because it smells really fresh. It smells like toothpaste. I love the smell of mint. Or I'm going to roll my Play-Doh out, and then I'm going to chop it up with my knife. So using words like that, you don't have to actually be speaking directly to the child. You're just narrating your own activity yourself, what you're actually doing yourself. But all these words get sort of absorbed by the child. And again, they're in context. So they'll understand what mint, the smell of fresh mint, smells like, and they'll understand what you mean by chopping. I'm going to chop it up with the knife. So you can see how children can be massively engaged in these fantastic activities with these materials, and you can still really support communication and language skills. Of course, if the child is talking to you and you're asking questions, you've got some back and forth going on, great, even better, because then you can really add lots and lots of fantastic you can expand their vocabulary with these fantastic words about the malleable materials. It's hard to say malleable materials sometimes. Okay, and then moving on from that, we've got PSED. Well, that's similar in a way to the characteristics of effective learning, that you want to develop, or we want to develop in our children, resilience and critical thinking, and the ability to try something and it might go wrong and not to worry, that it's okay. It's okay to try something, because that's how resilience is developed, isn't it? It's okay to make a mistake, or to try something and it doesn't work, because then you think again, how can I try it again? So what can I do differently next time to make that work? So that lends itself very well to malleable materials, because there's just the endless scope of what children might decide to do with those materials, isn't there? Then we've got physical. Well, if we're looking at pictures like this, you can see the child is pushing their hands through this was gloop and paint adding together. They've got that sensation, but they're also using their shoulders. And if you've ever seen a child at the beach or in a big mud pit digging, that's a lot of hard work. And we know, don't we, that the fine motor skills needed for writing and using scissors and things like that later on really come from building up those core muscles, their shoulder muscles, and then it works its way down to using the fine motor skills. So there's a lot of, it ticks a lot of boxes in the physical section. So you can be using fine motor skills in some aspects, depending what you're doing, poking small things into something, or squeezing some clay, or rolling some clay into a little ball. But then also you could be doing some large muscle movements, digging in a deep hole. And we'll get onto that a little bit later, because I wanted to talk about small scale and large scale malleable materials. Then we've got literacy. This is a really good picture for this, actually, because mark making. Now, there's another picture that will come up in a little while of a little boy moving his fingers through some wet sand at the beach. And this child is pushing something through some wet gloop, or sort of deconstructed gloop. All of this is mark making. Mark making doesn't have to be you're using a pen or a pencil or a piece of chalk or a paintbrush even. Mark making is anything where you feel the ability to make a mark and have agency over that material. So you're able to change that material and make a mark on it, and that's your agency over it, sort of control over it would be the way to say it. So it's early mark making skills. And for some children who aren't, this little one was quite young in this picture, but some children aren't interested in what we would call traditional mark making, are they? We've all had children who don't really want to sit down with a pen or a pencil or use paintbrushes or anything like that. But if you can engage them in different types of mark making, it does exactly the same thing. And they'll come on to using pens and pencils in their own time, won't they, when they feel ready to. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a sip of my tea. Before I lose my voice. So that's literacy. And then moving on to maths, well, I think we can all probably see that maths and malleable materials really, oh, thank you. I mean, this is obvious a maths one, because that's some scales that I've added to some Play-Doh that we had out. But actually maths, and in a similar way to the communication language, using words, mathematical language in play really helps children to make sense of what we're talking about. I'm going to cut it in half. It's going to be really deep. It's really flat. I'm cutting it into 4 pieces. I'm rolling it into a ball, that type of thing. So just using mathematical language like that, really helpful. But also you can add mathematical type of props or tools as a sort of provocation, just in case children want to do it. In this case, I'm not expecting those children to actually use the scales in the way that we would if we were cooking with them, but it's still, because they're balanced scales, it's still quite interesting for them to see that you could put something heavier in one side and balance it out, and how they go up and down. It just starts to give them the idea that weights can be balanced out and different materials weigh different amounts, and it gives you the chance to talk about that type of thing. And actually just feeling things that are heavy or light is also really helpful. So those, if anyone's got these type of scales, you'll know that some of those larger weights are really quite heavy, hefty weights, especially for little children to hold. And so they quite enjoy that feeling of trying to lift something up. So yeah, it covers maths. It's weight, shape, measuring. It just covers everything. As I said, I could really have gone through development matters and just ticked off pretty much everything with malleable materials. And then we're thinking about understanding the world. So in there, I selected how things work and observing changes. So we think about clay. Oh, lovely, thank you. How things work. This is one of my older children, obviously not an EYFS child, but he just happened to be holding this machine in exactly the right place for my picture. So this is a handheld pasta machine, and it's just fantastic. All the children love it. And as you can see, he's turned the handle and he's made the pasta come out into these long shapes. But even the very young children really enjoy turning that handle or unscrewing it and seeing what's going on inside that machine, and how do I put the Play-Doh in, or the clay, or whatever you're using in there, and what happens when you can choose different things to put on the ends with different shaped holes in, and you can do that up. And you know, it's just an interesting thing for children. But we were going to come on to things about tools a little bit later on. But understanding how things work, things like changing, how things change. So that deconstructed Play-Doh just now was quite a good example. how that works. What happens when I add one thing to another? How do I change that material? Here we are at the beach. Obviously, it's fantastic at the beach because it's very large scale, but also the tide is either coming in or going out. So we've all been in that situation where we've dug a hole or we've built a castle, and then the tide comes in and it changes. It might wash it away, it might flatten it a little bit, it might fill up the hole that you've dug. So understanding those sort of changes is all part of the understanding the world. Also with clay especially, but the same with mud really, are those changes that it just happened to it naturally, how it dries out, how you can make it wet again, and how the texture changes. So many opportunities there for really good communication and adding some really good descriptive language to children's play when they're using things like that. I was talking to someone yesterday when we were on another chat, and I was saying that we had some clay out in the garden, and I'd put it on a sort of a cable drum and then a tub on top of a cable drum. And it was out for a couple of weeks. And every evening I tried to remember to cover it over. And I forgot one evening, and we came back the next day and it had rained overnight. When we came into the garden the next morning, the lump of clay was in a big puddle. And that completely changed the texture of the Play-Doh. And it was a different experience for the children who the day before had found it was quite hard and it was drying out and it was starting to crack. And now it was smooth and sloppy and all those lovely descriptive words. And you could put your hands in and lift it up and it would be on your hand and the water would drip down. And even the grey water, which I think we would call slip, wouldn't we, was of interest to the children because it was an altered state for the Play-Doh, for the clay, sorry. And the last area of learning we've got is expressive art and design. Well, that again covers so many areas, so many parts of that area that I could have ticked them all. But the one I've selected because it matches the evidence is the exploring materials. And in a similar way to the understanding the world, it's the material that's changing, isn't it? Especially these natural materials, clay, mud, and sand. Play-Doh is a really lovely thing to use, and you can add to it and make it different, and you can or do all sorts of different things. But I think that you go a long way to beat, as we can see in this picture, just some mud and some water. This child has added some sand as well. This picture's from my setting, so we've got sand on one side of the garden, mud on the other, and they quite often combine the two, and that's absolutely fine because they're usually in the middle of some sort of cooking or potion or mixing experiment, and it's all about changing textures, isn't it? So I just hope that being able to pick apart the development matters like that can show you that you can observe a child playing with one of these materials or more, and just by observing and seeing what they're doing, or maybe talking to them and adding the descriptive words, you can cover so many areas of learning. And it's not something you've had to plan particularly. You might have had to buy the clay, but it's part of your continuous provision. And there's so much amazing learning to be had from these very, very simple ideas. Some of these ideas, in these pictures, these games or this activity has been going on and sort of changing and morphing from one thing to another over days, sometimes over a week. It might start off as one thing, it might morph into a different type of activity. It might be this child's mixing up potions, but then another child might decide that they were going to put the dinosaurs into it, or it's child-led, and there's so much rich learning from all of these materials. So I'm hoping that these pictures that we're just sort of scrolling through give you a little bit of an idea. This is deconstructed Play-Doh. For anyone who hasn't done that before, that basically you give the children the raw ingredients, although I should say you're not meant to give raw flour without heating it now, but you don't make the Play-Doh. You give the child the ingredients and you let them make it themselves. And it won't come out as Play-Doh probably, as we would know it, But that doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is the child has taken agency over that activity themselves, and they're experimenting and they're working out, do I add flour? Do I add water? What happens if I do this? If I mix it in that way? And sometimes their idea of what Play-Doh is might be different to ours, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, it's that Reggio Emilia almost approach that the child is also the expert. So that's always a good thing to have. So I hope that little part has helped working out what the I'm seeing all these pictures as they scroll past, how we're covering all these different areas of development just by using these very simple materials. But now I was hoping that we could maybe have a bit of input from you as well, either in the chat or by all means just jump on and sort of start talking about how you offer some of these provisions in your setting, because I know sometimes when I talk to some childminders, this is a good example actually. So indoors at the moment, I haven't got this out actually because it's the summer, but in the winter, when we might be indoors a little bit more, I have an indoor sand provision and an outdoor one. So there's the option there for children. And I know for some people that can be quite a concern. How would I do that? And it was for me as well at first. I had to really sort of think about how I was going to do it. And it's actually very, very, very simple. This is just an old suitcase. I've put a piece of plastic on the bottom, like thick plastic liner, just because sand is damp when you buy it. And it's on a bath mat, so that the sand obviously comes out. And if you've got a floor that you don't mind sand going on, that's fine. But I know that's not possible for everyone. You might have carpet, for instance, and then that would be a bit of a pain, wouldn't it? But I have laminate and it makes the floor very slippery. So I have a bath mat, and then if the sand goes on the bath mat, I just shake it back in again, and it's really, really no problem at all. So if anyone's got any ideas like that, oh, sorry, someone's just asking something, but it was the question about the Padlet again. And this is the large scale that I've got outside, large scale sand. Some people have got much bigger sand areas than this, and fantastic if you have. But for me, it's important that an area is big enough for a child to actually get inside it. So they need to sit in it and they can actually experience it with their whole body. I haven't got a huge setting, so this is the biggest I can get at the moment. And the mud pit is probably about the same size as this. So you can offer things like large scale mud outside because children really want to dig. And this is out at the park. So one of the things I put on the Padlet is use your local facilities. If you're lucky enough to live somewhere that's got a big sand area like this. So I'm in Colchester, and this is the Castle Park. They've got a really well-designed sand area with all sorts of different things like scales and weights, buckets that tip out, and pipes that you can see on there. If you've got something like that, by all means, use that. Take advantage of that, or take along your own things. We've taken our own buckets and spades in this one. You could even take your own pipes and things, couldn't you, along? And the same goes with mud, because I know for a lot of people, you might not feel that you want to have a big hole in your garden, which is completely understandable. If you can have a mud pit, it's super, super easy to manage. You might need to sort of edge it. We had to edge ours because we've got very sandy soil, but it's used every single day. There's always one or more children in there digging, putting water in there, using trucks or dinosaurs, or burying things in there, or making a puddle in there. It's just, it's so valuable and just like the cheapest thing to have. But I do understand that that's not suitable for everyone. So you can, there's another picture on here somewhere, which is just a tub with some soil in it indoors, with some gravel that the child was using when they had an interest with little diggers and things. This child, obviously just a baby, was very interested in feeling wet sand. It wasn't quite big enough to be able to get into the sand pit by herself, and was frustrated that she was getting stuck in there. So I just put a little bit on a tray for her, and that was enough for her interest and that this early mark making and sensory feel of moving her hands through the sand and feeling how the sand was pushed to one side and then moving her fingers back. So it really doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a massive sand area. But I would say, if possible, try and have access with both mud and sand to a large area where children can actually use their whole bodies. They can dig a hole, rather than just standing at a sand tray. Damon, I think Michelle's trying to ask a question, but I'm not sure how to do a hand thing. Sorry, Michelle, bear with us.
If you touch your microphone, I should be able to speak, I think.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt.
No,
Sorry.
feel free to interrupt, Michelle, it's fine.
It was about before when you said talking about the sand, and then I said, if has anyone got any kind of sort of ideas that they use as such. I've recently invested in a crafty pod. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're a pop-up, almost like a little ball pit tent. But they've been
seen those, yes.
Yeah, they've been specially designed for messy play and things like that. I've just invested in that because my children are very into things like chickpea play, and I've got hundreds of chickpeas, and when I'm in my lounge they go everywhere. So I've literally invested in one of these, and I've got the larger one, but it comes with a like waterproof mat for the bottom as well. But that's been a lifesend because they can be as creative as they want without worrying about them going underneath my sofa or and then you can easily clear it all up, pop it back up in the bag, and job done. So I've kind of thought that's been quite good. So that was just a little thing to your suggestion. If you said, has anyone got any sort of suggestions or whatever?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I think that sounds perfect. Can I ask how much those sort of things cost?
I bought mine quite a while ago. It was about 30, maybe £40, I think. But for me, I kind of knew it would be a good investment. And for me, it was for my sanity as well. And I've actually done more kind of messy play in my house with it, rather than being a bit too precious of, oh no, that's going to ruin my carpet or stuff like that. And then obviously when children are pouring things, of course they miss the tray or stuff like that, and it just scatters everywhere. So this is a way, because they've got high sides, it was a way to contain it and stuff like that. So yeah, for me it was a good investment, and hopefully it should last a long time.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that, Michelle. I think it sounds like a brilliant idea, because the main thing is it's facilitated you being able to provide more, say, sort of more messy play or more of this sort of sensory play than you would before. And I think it's completely understandable that not everyone wants their house covered in clay or mud.
Yeah, definitely.
and when we work from our own home, it's I don't think many of us are too, like you said, precious about these things, but every single day you probably don't want chickpeas everywhere every day, but that means that you can still offer that experience that the children are really interested in, and they can still enjoy it, but also it's just more manageable for you. And I think that totally makes sense if that works for you. Thank you for that.
Just very quickly, I've just looked up, it's £38.99 for the large one. There are smaller ones, but for me, obviously because I've got a few children, I'd rather have it bigger, and rather than having it too small. So
I think that really makes sense. I think also a lot of childminders nowadays, it didn't used to be so in the past so much, but work from homes that are rented, and you just can't have your carpet or whatever you've got there. It's very hard to avoid that getting really messy, isn't it, if you want to do those things in your house. So if we can find ways around those sort of issues, but it still means that the children are getting those fantastic experiences, that's the best. I think it was called a crafty pod, wasn't it, Michelle?
Yes, it was. I'm just putting, if it's okay if I put a link on there in the chat.
Please do. That's fantastic.
I'm not affiliated at all with it. It's just I've obviously saw it, and I don't want you thinking I'm part, shares or whatever. It's not.
For crafty pod. No, that's fine. I think that sounds like a really, really good idea. Also, I think for quite a lot of us, we have one room maybe that we're working from that has to cover everything. It has to be for all types of activities and nap times and food, and it's just not really practical all the time to have that completely open to everything, is it? So I think if that works for you, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. Oh, lovely. There's the link there, Barbara. Thank you for that, Michelle. That's really, really good. Because, yeah, so I think if you can't manage these things in your own home for whatever reason, I would definitely say try and find somewhere where you can do it outside, maybe. I know quite a few childminders go to the woods and take things sort of where you can dig, especially if it's a woods where you've got a little stream or anything like that, where you've got a little mud patch, that type of thing. That makes it makes it just easier. It sort of facilitates that sort of play with, or enables that sort of play without you having to necessarily have it in your house, because you can just Jackie, with the Padlet, just open it up and you should be able to keep it. I should say with the Padlet, there's a lot of information on there. Please feel free to use any of it. It's not just for this session, it's just what I use in general for all sorts of things. So yeah, so we're thinking of large scale, small scale, for all these different types of materials. So sand we could do in those sort of crafty pods. Does anyone have any sort of ideas on how you're facilitating mud? Does anyone else have mud pits or areas where children can dig, or how are you sort of supporting that type of play? And actually the same for sand. If you haven't got you know, a space outside, have you got access to sand somewhere else, or the beach even? So feel free to chip in if you've got anything. Have we got some more photos we could be going through, please, Damon? While we're waiting.
Yeah, hold on a second and I'll get them up again.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing I wanted to ask everyone is please chip in with ideas of tools you use with any of these malleable materials. I know for some of the sessions we've had, like the clay session and the malleable material sessions, you've had some brilliant goodie bags. But is there anything that you use that you think, as Michelle said about that crafty pod, oh, everyone should know about this because it's really, really, really good? It might be something that's like a freebie thing. It could be something that cost you money, but it's really helpful just to know. So I've put a link on the Padlet to these metal tubs that the last bit was in, that everyone always asks me, where did you get those metal tubs? So I've put a link on there. As with Michelle, I'm not affiliated with those, but they're really, really good for this type of play. So this is at one of our network sessions where we had just clay and loose parts. And you can see the children there were rolling out the clay on some Hessian. It's a really easy thing to have access to. Oh, let's have a look at Soph. What's she say? I have mud in a box with my mud kitchen, as I don't have a muddy area. However, the children... Oh, why can I only see a little bit of it? Sorry, bear with me while I just open up the chat. Children don't seem massively interested, but love the sand pit. Why do you think that might be? Soph, do you think that's... There's not really a very much of it, whereas in the sand pit they can get into the sand pit and do things? Is it just too small? I mean, I guess there's really, if you can have a sand pit, you could also try having a mud pit, couldn't you? You know, I don't mean necessarily digging up your garden, but you know, whatever you've got your sand in, you could also do a similar thing with mud if you had space, couldn't you? Why do you think that is, that the children aren't massively interested in it?
I do think my children at the moment are quite funny with mess, so I'm not sure if it's more that. So I've kind of taken the mud away for a little bit, and I'm going to reintroduce it. But at the moment, they play with the sand with the mud kitchen more than the mud, if you know what I mean. Anyway.
Yeah. That's okay. You know, if that's what the children want to put in. I mean, it has to be child-led, really, doesn't it? If that's what they want to do. And maybe they'll come back to it. As you say, you've taken it away for a little while. Maybe they'll come back to it later. How are they with things like clay or Play-Doh, or are they finding that Is it a bit too sensory for them, maybe?
They love Play-Doh. They're not massively keen, well, some of them are not massively keen on clay, but some of them are getting better with it.
Right. Yeah. I think clay can be very, I mean, messy's not maybe the right word, but it can be, for want of a better word, very messy, can't it? It can, it can be all over completely, you're covered in clay all over your body. And that's not necessarily something that all children are comfortable with, is it? Actually, I went to an art group not long ago, and it's more of a music group, and at the end they have a little tiny art section, and that was a tiny bit of clay. Every child was given a very small piece of clay and some little sticks like matchsticks but without the end, and the children were so happy pushing matchsticks into this tiny lump of clay. It kept them busy for a good 15-20 minutes, and it made me think, it doesn't always have to be massive, does it? Doesn't always have to be complete immersion in mud. Not every child wants to be covered in whatever. And actually that clay was soft, but it wasn't slippery or anything like that. So it wasn't too much of a sensory overload. But that sort of thing is quite a good idea, isn't it? I'm just having a look at the chat. Sorry, bear with me while I'm doing that. So let's have a look. Shannon, I put fairies in our mud tub and now the kids don't stop using it. Oh, that's brilliant. I think that's fantastic. If that's what, it's a bit of a provocation, isn't it? The fairies might be living there. And if that's the thing that's taken the children's interest, and they're sort of going for it and are interested in using those fairies in the mud, fantastic. And same goes with things like dinosaurs, doesn't it? Or diggers, or whatever the children are interested in. At one point I bought some old necklaces from a charity shop and hid them in our mud pit and didn't say anything and just let the children discover them, and of course they thought they'd dug up treasure, and it was amazing for them. Karen says, my children also enjoy moon sand that holds its shape. We use it with egg cups, bowls, small square boxes, etc. That's a really good point, actually, Karen. And I think if we didn't have any time restrictions, we could have expanded the definition of malleable materials, couldn't we? You can make your own. I know that moon sand is usually stuff that you buy, isn't it? But you can make something similar where you have flour and oil, and that makes a similar sort of texture to that. If you took the sand away and replaced it with the mud, would they be more likely to play? Oh, that's what Barbara said. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, isn't it? I wonder if that would be the case. I wonder if they would. Maybe what they need to do is go somewhere where there's mud and they see other children engaging in the mud. That might be something that helps, mightn't it? But if they're not ready or for some reason just not interested in it, I think also we have to always remember, don't we, that some children might come from homes where parents aren't crazy about them getting messy, and that can really inhibit children's sort of exploratory nature and the feeling that it's okay to just dive in and get covered in stuff. So I guess there could be all sorts of reasons behind that, couldn't there? And I'm sure they'll come to it eventually. Okay, so this one, yeah, this tray was one of the trays I was talking about, and the children had been playing with this for several days and had been all sorts of different things and had different things added, and then eventually they put paper straws in there, and this was a birthday cake, and they were the candles. So yeah, what else does anyone add to their provision? Or you don't actually have to add it yourself, but what do the children like to add to those malleable materials? I do think a pasta machine is a really good thing if you can get it, for clay and for Play-Doh. So here's the glue. The children had just collected these leaves in the park. This was last autumn. And they were, as you can see, spooning up the glue and trickling it all over the place. Let's have a look. Old CDs with, oh, that's a good idea. Hang on, let's have a look. We use old CDs with clay or Play-Doh. My first thoughts were for reflection, but the children use them in a lot of ways. For example, to cut the dough by rolling the CD edge and squashing the dough, etc. Or a bit like a pizza cutter, Emma. what a great idea. And actually that's great, because it can be really easy for us to assume that children are going to use things in a certain way, but really we need to just let them find a way to use it, don't we? Otherwise we're restricting what they can do, and they might think, oh, you know, you can't, we can only use that one way. Sorry, is someone saying something? Oh, no. So let's have a look at the pictures as they're scrolling through, and we'll just do a bit of chat about those.
Can I just interject with some
yeah,
of your
of course.
make
Yeah.
a point? It's really lovely to see, and I don't know how many other people do this, but there's no chairs, and that's really, really important, because the physical development's another area that Malleable Play really does support. There isn't anything on the evidence store for that at the moment, but it will be. But yeah, we've got the fine motor, but by removing the chairs, children really have to use their core muscles to kind of manipulate the Play-Doh and the clay. Obviously the more resistance, the more you're building up the muscles there. So, but like looking at all of your pictures is just, if anybody else had noticed that, there's just no chairs about. You can really see the children stretching over, crossing the midline, doing all of those wonderful things we want them to do to build up that physical development. And also perhaps going back and looking at the sensory side of it, on the self-regulation and executive function, and how it ties in with there. There's a new piece on the evidence store on the self-regulation and executive function, especially for children with, say, special needs. Some of them like to really immerse themselves in like a malleable, like whether it's mud, and be completely in the and it has a calming effect. There is evidence to say that, but it's just like looking at your pictures, it's just lovely to see no chairs.
Oh, right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, Lisa. And also, on a similar note, which I didn't really think we were going to get time for, but it supports so many schemas, things like malleable material, because you're enveloping and all that type of thing. But, you know, that's maybe something for another day. Yes. And also, I know there wasn't on the evidence store, but there has been research that shows that if you sit a child at a table with the Play-Doh in front of them, they will only use the thing that's directly in front of them. Whereas if you put it out as a provocation or whatever, they will get up and move around and reach, like you say, they'll reach across, and they'll use different tools and different materials, and the whole play really will be expanded, the whole exploration will be expanded. Whereas if you put them on a chair and expect them to sit on a chair, or not even expect, if there is a chair there and the thing is in front of them, they will limit their exploration to that space. I was reading something quite recently about that. So in this picture, this was last week actually, when we had this nice hot weather, and the children, as you can see there, they've got scissors, and they were just going around the garden cutting leaves and things. I don't have such lovely flowers in my garden, I'm afraid, because the rabbit eats everything, but this was a bunch of flowers that someone had given me and had seen better days, and so I'd put them out in the mud kitchen. I wonder if, I think actually it's on the Padlet. I did take a picture of my mud kitchen just to show everyone that I think most of us do have mud kitchens, or something similar to a mud kitchen. And the mud kitchens can be super simple, can't they? But they're such an important thing for children, just to have a space where they can do mixing, I would say. It's just, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to look fancy. It doesn't have to have knobs and doors and things. It does nothing at all. Just a surface with pots and pans and things is enough. Oh yeah, it's in the background there. Sorry, I've put it on the Padlet though, if people want to have a look. So you can see my mud kitchen is not an attractive looking thing at all, but it is used all day, every day, non-stop. And you could really facilitate something similar. That in that last picture, that's a cable drum. That would do the job just as well, if you don't want to have something permanently in your garden. But I would say, with all of these materials, try and have a space that's for mixing, a space where children can come to mix stuff up, because that's just such an important, I don't know, sort of part of the whole experience of using these materials. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. In fact, fancy stuff just gets worn out, doesn't it, in the garden? So I wouldn't worry too much. Yes, you're right. No chair in that one, is there? They're just this child was particularly interested in the shells, and we'd had some Play-Doh as well that I'd made the day before, and so I just put the Play-Doh with that and a very, very small amount of sand, but it was enough for them to be interested in combining those two textures together. And that child used to always like to sit in the case with the sand as well and be completely enclosed in it, which is a lovely thing to be able to do, isn't it? As you say, it's a sensory thing and can be a calming thing for some children. The child at the beginning who is covered head to toe in mud is one of my grandchildren, and she has always done that, always covered herself in anything. It could be paint, it can be mud, cream, anything. She just really enjoys that sensation of being completely immersed in whatever it is she can find. So this is a good example, though, I think, this picture of what you can add. Something simple that you've already got, doesn't have to be anything complex. This child just particularly was interested in a bowl I had with some shells in it, so I put them on the table as a sort of a provocation. You really don't have to add anything fancy. Giving the children some scissors, and if you don't mind them traveling around your garden and slipping off leaves and things, herbs are always really good. If you know any florists that are have old flowers and things they don't need, please get them to send them to you. They're perfect, aren't they? Here's Jackie. Let's see what Jackie's got to say. So it's yeah, anything at all. I live in a small rented flat and I'm limited to what I can do. I go to the park, and they play in the sandpit or run through the puddles. I can't have a mud or sand area in my flat. That's completely understandable, Jackie, but you are still facilitating that, aren't you? Because you're going to the park and using the facilities you've got locally. And I think you might find there's somewhere, if you've got a little woodland nearby or anything like that, you might find there's a sort of a muddy patch there somewhere that the children can. I used to go to the woods in Colchester, and there was we used to call it the swamp, but actually it was just a big puddle that was sort of permanently there. And we used to just take some spoons and a couple of saucepans, and I don't know if she's on here tonight, but Claire does something similar. Claire Bat from Colchester, I know she takes her sort of pots and pans with her when she goes to the woods, and that was enough. They were happy with a few spoons and a couple of little frying pans, actually they were, because they were flat enough to fit in my bag. And you are still facilitating that type of experience. Or if you can get to the beach, go to the beach and really do some digging. But I totally understand, Jackie, and well done for just still, there's a limit to what we can do in our own homes, isn't there? And especially, as you say, if it's rented, you have to bear in mind that you're going to have to hand that back at some point in the future in a a good condition. So that's fine, and I wouldn't want anyone to feel like that they're any less of a practitioner, because a great practitioner, because they haven't got those things in their setting. This is more about having those practical ideas about what we can, how we can do things. And one of those practical ideas is, yes, go to the park. We do it all the time. We go to the sandpit at the park because it's big. And actually, if it's rained, it's even better, because then there's a puddle in the middle of the sandpit, and then it's like the beach, and it's, it's great. That's what it's there for, isn't it? We might as well take advantage of these things. Has anyone got any more questions? Because we're coming to the end of the hour. I hope that's been helpful for you all. I really appreciate your feedback about how you're doing things. I think Damon's put the Padlet link again on there. Last time I had a few people contact me afterwards to ask about different things. So I'm just going to put my email address in there in case anyone wants to email me and ask me, and then I can have a chat with you separately about whatever it is. But I think you're all doing an amazing job, and well done. And I love all these ideas. I hadn't thought of putting old CDs in, but actually, Emma, that's a really good idea, because people are always giving them away, aren't they? No one uses them anymore. I can see how that would work really well. and Karen's idea with the egg cups. We have lots of egg cups, so they're such a nice little thing to use, aren't they? Someone's got a new message. Have I got a link?
Sorry, Kim, could I just interrupt and just say that I put the link there that now because you've given up your evening, people who are attending tonight, they get a free gift. But to get your free gift, then you have to fill out that form, the link I've put there, and on there is a space to put your address, because then it makes it a whole lot easier for me to print them out, and I will post them to you. We're just deciding what your free gift will be, so it'll be a mystery gift, but it will come in the post within the next few days. Lisa and Kim were just having a chat before the webinar, so it will be a relevant gift to tonight. Well worth it. So if you just click on that link, fill in the feedback, and where it asks your address, name and address, just put that in, and then we'll get that across to you. But I will close that later tonight. So it's really just to make sure it's people who are only on the webinar. So please do that now or in the next few minutes, and then I'll make sure you get your gift. Thank you, Kim. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem at all. Thank you for that, Damon. Barbara, it's on the Padlet, that link. It's if you go to the malleable materials section, as I say, scroll all the way along to the right, and there are more pictures on there, not just from my setting, but just pictures I found online of general ideas, of practical ideas of what you can add, how you can do things, how how to do things on maybe on a smaller scale. But I think you're all doing a fantastic job, and I really appreciate you giving up your evening to come and listen to me telling you all this stuff. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we're hoping to do another webinar in the next couple of weeks, I think, probably. So there's your free gift thing. Thank you, Michelle. That was really helpful, and thank you for chipping in with your advice about the crafty pod. I think that sounds like a brilliant idea, and actually that could be something that it was Jackie, wasn't it? Jackie, that sounds like something that might work for you in your flat, not necessarily with mud. I get that you might not want a whole thing of mud in your flat, but it might work if you want to do something a little bit more messy, but on a bigger scale, maybe, that worked for you. It says there's another message, but I can't see it. Hang on. Oh, thank you, Natalie. That's really nice of you. Thank you. And lovely to see you all, or see your names anyway. And thank you. That's really nice of you, everyone. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks, and look forward to seeing your mystery gift when it arrives. It's a massive tub of mud.
Yeah, either mud or sand, I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's not going to be those metal tubs, I'm afraid, so please don't get your hopes up about those, but it will be something nice. Thanks, Louise. That's really nice. Thank you. Yeah, feel free to look on the Padlet, and please just message me if there's anything that didn't make sense, or you want to just ask about something, or anything at all. And I'll keep adding to the Padlet. I'm always putting stuff on there, so you can keep that forever and just pop back in and look at things. It's particularly relevant for childminders in Essex, because there's a lot of information on there about how things are done in Essex, but it's also relevant for childminders outside the county. Oh, well done. Thank you for that. Oh, I'm really pleased that was helpful. Oh, good. Thank you for that. Oh, thanks, Barbara. That's really nice of you. Thanks, Karen. Well, have a nice evening, everyone. Oh, no, Shannon. Oh, no. How did you do that? That's not a good start to the summer holidays, is it? Oh, I fell over some. Oh, Shannon, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope it's not too much pain. Yeah, and I hope it gets better soon. Thank you, Andrea. That's really nice of you. There's a link to the Padlet. I'll pop it in again. Oh no, it's not the Padlet. That's the. Hang on 1 second. I'll find it for you. It's right at the very top of the chat, but I can also just quickly find it. Bear with me. There we go. Oh, thank you, Damon. He's already done it. No, don't worry about joining late. That's fine. That's fine. Ollie, have you got the, did you get the Padlet link? Damon's just put it on. Hopefully you got it. Well, thank you, everyone. Don't forget to fill in your your feedback form so you can get your freebie. And we'll see you hopefully in another couple of weeks with another webinar where we can chat and share some best practice ideas. Take care, everyone.
I'll start putting people in the waiting room now,
Okay.
because sometimes people can't find the button to leave or whatever, so I'll start doing that.
They're just stuck in here forever. Oh, great. Thanks, Ollie. Right. I think it's just me left. Me and you, Damon.
Excellent. Well, thank you ever so much, Kim. That was brilliant.
That's all
Thank you
right.
for
No,
that.
no problem.
That's
All
really
right.
good.
I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, take care. All right.
Bye.
I'll just let me know some dates when you want to do another one.
Yeah, sure.
Whatever fits in with you. So just let me know, and
Okay.
I can I can set up and whatever. But thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Okay,
All
no
right.
problem. All right.
Thanks,
Thanks,
then.
Dave.
Bye
Okay,
then.
bye.
Bye.